Greetings, YouTube. I was recently reading a digital copy of Fading Sun, and I think I own a physical copy of Fading Suns, but it was purchased and read so long ago I had like no memory of it. Um, so rereading it, I wanted to check out the system and then look at the settings. I know it's very popular with a lot of people, and I got to tell you, I found the setting to be ponderous. Kind of the same way I find the setting of like Warhammer 40,000K ponderous. It's just this huge enveloping mass of established institutional social conservatism that just sits on the setting like this enveloping dome that's slowly collapsing and crushing everything beneath it. If that sounds overly dramatic, it's because that's the kind of vibe Fading Suns gave me. It's just like any of you who are students of history know that at one time the Catholic Church had like legislative powers. They could like pull people into, courts and find them guilty and punish them and stuff like that. They could actually do that. They actually had the power to have, ecclesiastical uh, uh, legal authority, and that was evil, and it was used for no good, and it was just an ability for men to exert their control over the world at large and deciding, oh, you get to live and you don't get to live, and you get to have to behave a certain way because it makes me comfortable, that kind of thing. And it got me wondering, why do we do that? Why do we take institutions and historical cultures and vibes like that and put them into our games? Why is it so rare to find a truly original game setting? Now, some games by default are going to be based on our world, post-apocalyptic games. I'm a big fan of post-apocalyptic stuff. I make post-apocalyptic weapons as a hobby. Go check out my DeviantArt. I'm crafting in my shop every darn weekend. So those have to be linked to something that falls under the category of the contemporary world as the foundation for that. Some of them are set so far in the future that they are essentially brand new settings, just using this world as their background. But most of them have some direct connection to us in some way. But if you're going to be coming up with a truly original world, why is it that we feel the need to just pick up a culture, move it over to this original world, and then drop it? And like, hey, look at that. This culture over here, they have a different name and they have a different language, but they're kind of like the French. And these folks over here, they have a different name and a different culture, a different language, but they're kind of like the Germans. Why do we do that? And when I think of original settings, one of the things that pops into my head right off the bat is Jorun. Jorun is a very unusual setting. It's a science fiction setting about a colony of humans go to a place to set up a colony, and they discover that things don't work out quite the way they thought they would, and the place, of course, is full of other peoples. So there is that whole colonial element to it, which is a little disturbing. But when Jorun was written, this is not an excuse, it's an explanation. When Jorun was written, the whole zeitgeist about colonialism hadn't really kicked in. People really hadn't begun to speak, at least in the Western world, speak out about the dangers and the evils of colonialism. It was just kind of the accepted thing, like white people came here and did that, and white people came here and did that, and we just kind of took it for granted and never realizing that the things that white people were doing were like atrocities against our species. So written in an era before that kind of awakening of that understanding by white folks, because take my word for it, all the people who have been, colonized by white people were already aware of it. That's the era that Jorun was written in. So I cut them a little bit of slack, as none of us in like the white folk gaming community were really addressing lots of things that that today would maybe even fall into the category of like intersectional feminism. We weren't really being aware of how racism plays into our settings, and classism and ageism and ableism and homophobia and transphobia and misogyny, and the evils of colonialism and things like that. We weren't really dealing with those things at that time, and we're much more aware of them now. At least those of us who have got like eyes and ears and are willing to listen to the people who have been, oppressed and discriminated against for millennia in some cases. Um, but why can't we come up with something truly original? So I'm having a hard time thinking of a setting that is truly original, that isn't completely based on us. There are like the world tree that comes close. That's a world that is literally on an infinite tree, and people live on the surface, on the branches and things like that. And it's full of anthro races and weird things like, the gods that walk amongst folks and things like that. And they're uh, different. They're very much animalistic in their structure. So there's a lot of familiarity in the sense that the characters you're looking at kind of look like anthropomorphic animals that we sort of recognize. But that's where pretty much the similarities end. And the world tree is probably a setting that I don't think has any connections to us at all, and it is as close, I think, to a truly original setting that I can think of. And I've looked at a lot of systems over the years, and I can't really think of many more. And I'm still want to know, why can't we do something truly original? Why is it so hard for us? Why is it we always take the shorthand? And I'm as guilty as the next guy about this. Don't get me wrong. We take the shortcut because it's easier to like just say, okay, Nazis in space, boom, Star Wars done. You know what I mean? Uh, that's you file off the serial numbers, but that's what the stormtroopers are. They're the empires. There's Nazis in space, um, and like Marvel, the Hydra, they're super Nazis. I mean, literally connected to the Nazi Party, not just like, there's not just a thematic connection. No, no, no. They're literally connected to the Nazis. Um, but we do that kind of thing all the time. And like I said, the world tree is about the only one I can think of that's truly and absolutely not connected to us. I remember reading a few years ago about this. It was supposed to be like, it's a game based on anthropomorphic dinosaurs, and it's supposed to take place in like another star system. So again, completely separate from science fiction, but all of the names of like everything in the book are all based on like names from our histories, Earth history, and yet these things were pretty much not supposed to have any connection with us. Like these dinosaurs left our planet, long before mammals even evolved, or mammals were like shrew-sized creatures kind of thing. So why would they have all these cultural references to our histories and our mythologies and things like that? So all these things had names that you and I would recognize and not even think a second about it. Then you stop and you go, hey, well, hold on a second. Why did these dinosaurs that have never had heard of anything having to do with, contemporary Earth or human history in the least, be using names that are exactly the same? And it was just lazy writing. There's no reason you can't come up with original names. And again, I'm not saying I'm innocent here. I'm not. I've committed these crimes. I have. Okay? And when I come up with ideas in my head, sometimes I still commit them. But I'd like to move into more original thought processes, at least for some things like high fantasy and some of the really weird science fiction and stuff. Because again, I love, post-apocalyptic and things that have to do with our time as well. But when it comes to high fantasy, there's no reason we have things connected to us. Yes, humans are humans. So if you've got a setting where humans are in it, you are automatically going to have some kind of subconscious connection to us because we're human. The people sitting at the table are playing these characters. But there's nothing saying you can't have a setting that has no humans. yes, it's going to mean that people are going to have to stretch their way of looking at the world, and some folks are just going to do the whole Star Trek thing where they'll be playing humans with something, stuck on their forehead, um, because of the limitations that all of the actors and things in like Doctor Who and Star Treks and things were limited by the fact that they were being played by humans. That's one of the reasons I love the animated Star Wars and Star Trek stuff so much, is because they can go truly, absolutely alien without reservation, because it takes no more effort to draw a truly alien character in Star Trek than it takes to draw a truly human one in Star Trek. There's exactly the same amount of effort. The Star Trek animated series, the with the original cast with Spock and Dr. McCoy and Kirk, um, they had really aliens on their crew because, again, in animation, you didn't have to worry about makeup and things, and you don't have to worry about the fact that there had to be a human inside that suit when you're doing animation. I recommend that series. You have to take it with a grain of salt. It's a thing of its time, and some of the storylines are kind of absurd. For example, there is now a giant robotic Spock somewhere in space, and there's a place where they all cast spells. It was a trip, really. I'm serious. It was a trip. I own a copy. I own the collection, and I think it's worth your time. But I just I'm tired of transplanting the Catholic Church to other planets and other histories, and have them be ponderously crushing the lives of people with their iron grip of social conservatism. I am sick of that. I want settings where they are still in vibrant, exciting worlds that are there to explore and have cool encounters, and there's deep history, and you can find own ruins and things, but also they're a thriving democratic, socialist, feminist environment where there is equality and where there are rights and people aren't being put into slavery, and then trans people aren't second-class citizens, and everyone is considered to be a citizen regardless of what their meat looks like, as long as they are a sapient mind and they're willing to abide by the laws, kind of thing. I'm looking for utopias. I understand this. But why shouldn't we? We're making them, right? We're creating them. So what's preventing us from creating a world that is what we would like it to be, even if it doesn't exist? And it doesn't have to be dull. It just has to be, in my mind, open and all about exploring not just the physical spaces, but the emotional and the cultural spaces. So when I read Fading Suns, I'm seeing this just crush where I am trying to, in my head at least, craft a gaming environment where it's all about expanding rights and expanding cultures, to allowing people to become anything they want regardless of their forms. Yes, I'm talking about like a transhumanist environment, and I'm okay with that. Whether it's high fantasy or high science fiction, or science fiction or science fantasy, I don't think there's any reason why people can't be allowed to explore and to understand who they are, what they want to become on every conceivable level, whether it's spiritually, mentally, emotionally, or genetically. I think they should have that right. And in a world where you can graft on things or have spells transform you, or nanotech baths that rewrite your genes or something, we have that ability. So why do we use it so rarely? Are we scared of that open-ended nature of it? The fact that it offers us the chance to do anything? Does that scare us, or do we find that less likely to offer us an adventuring challenge? Do you need to have that ponderous thing to fight against? Do you need a campaign based about taking on the space Nazis? I guess I'm just tired of having to relive the world I find myself in. one where there are fascists and misogynists and racists and homophobes and transphobes all willing to not just scream and yell at people, but to enact laws that will disenfranchise them and limit their ability to live, in some cases just gun them down in the streets. I guess I want better. And I guess I'm tired of games that just show me the worst. I guess they do offer us a chance to fight against the machine, but why can't we have a world without the machine?